Rob is from School Perceptions. I think we can close this without stopping that. Good, perfect. Okay, so there's two Robs here tonight. Rob from School Perceptions on the screen, and then we have Rob Brown from Nexus is here, and Rob Brown has been part of this before many times, and Rob from School Perceptions has been here obviously many times as well. So I'm guessing you two will kind of support one another. Is that kind of how it typically goes? Rob,
yep.
Rob Brown,
yep.
Rob D.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, with that, take it away. I'm going to turn the lights off in this cool area so it's easier to see. I'll try to get the other monitor on for you guys, so you can see the screen as well. So, all right.
All right. Thank you, sir. So we're going to get started with your report dated for tonight, November 19th. But I do want to talk right away off the different color codes that you're going to see this evening. You'll see some blue slides. We're going to spend the least amount of our time on blue slides just because there's no new information. It's either going to be a quick overview of who we are or we reproduce all the things that were in your survey in this report. So in other words, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time there, but we will spend a lot of time in the middle two color codes. In fact, towards the beginning of your survey, we'll talk about who took your survey, where do they live, how old they are, etc. Those will be represented in yellow. Certainly, the reason why you hired us to get you some results and analysis of potential projects you could undertake. And then, of course, at the end, I want to leave some time for you to ask any questions you have for us. Speaking of us, this isn't our first time working with Spring Valley. We helped you out in 2018 when you were looking at the elementary school. Then we did another survey with you in 22, and then now tonight in 2024. But really, anything that you did here is not really new for us. This isn't our first rodeo. We were founded in 2002, and since that time, we've done over 3 million staff, parent, student, and community surveys in the name of school improvement, and helped over 1,000 districts nationwide do exactly what you have done: general school improvement, strategic planning, and the pre-referendum planning process. So for you specifically, your survey data has really quieted down. It closed up about 3 weeks ago, October 28th to be specific. And you outdid yourselves. You had a better response rate, more respondents this time than you did in fall 2022, to the tune of 474 this time round, 422 last time. You had a great response rate at 20%. You're actually above average there. So I feel really good in terms of the folks that gave you the time to fill the survey out. And then finally, I guess if you want to ballpark around that number, bear in mind the margin of error is about plus or minus 4.5%. Unfortunately, that is not something that you have any control over. Or us for that matter, or Rob or John or anybody. It's really a function of how many people do you have in your community to survey. The more people you have, the tighter the margin of error gets. So when we're working with the Green Bays, the Wauwatoses, the La Crosses of the world, that margin of error gets very tight because they have a lot of people living in their community. For the smaller communities and smaller districts we work with across Wisconsin, there's just not that many people that live there. So unfortunately, that margin of error is just up a little bit higher. But because of the response rate you got, I think we can get you some pretty accurate predictive data this evening. Another thing that I like, in addition to having more respondents than you did last time around, you have really good representation from your 65 plus. So we do look at your data district-wide, so not just in Spring Valley itself, but also the other municipalities that feed into your school district. Your 65 plus district-wide is 16.2%. Your survey respondents, 25%. Are 65 plus. And in our world, that's a good thing because not all of these age groups are going to be represented the same on election day. Not all of these groups vote at the same rate. Your 65 plus will be there, whether it's November, whether it's February, whether it's April, whether it's August, no matter the election, 65 plus are very loyal voters. So we really want to make sure what they think, if for no other reason, then they're also going to be overrepresented come election day. And you cleared that hurdle as well, which is another great place to be. Next up, we asked if people live within the district of Spring Valley, school district of Spring Valley. You may ask, why would you send this to people who don't live here? And that's a really good question. There's a couple of reasons why that could happen. One, your staff, of course, are under no requirement to live within the district's boundaries. But they have an email address on file. They get the survey. Any parent who chooses to open enroll into the district doesn't live there, or they wouldn't need to open enroll in. So they get the survey. They have an email address on file. Or, there's all kinds of situations. We work with folks. They have some Airbnbs in the area. They have a vacation home. They are landlord of a property, or they own land and have a PO box, or some sort of address on file, but they may not live there. So it's not that we don't want their opinion, we do, but if they don't have the authority to vote within your school district's boundaries, then they can't control the outcome of a referendum. So we're going to filter out those 9% of folks that said no and only focus on the 91% that said yes, because they will ultimately control whether a referendum passes or fails in the school district of Springdale.
Hey, Rob, would you mind going back one slide? Something I'd like to point out, in the vast majority of communities where School Perceptions and my firm work together, we find that the 65 plus typically is rather heavy. Not only because they take the survey, but many of our communities are leaning towards the older part of the population. The interesting thing about Spring Valley is that the mean age of the folks in your community is just over 40. The vast majority of your population is right, and as you can tell, the 35 to 44 is that 31%. And oddly enough, those are the ages of your parents. And you remember when we first started talking, the reason you failed 23 is because we weren't able to get our parents out to vote. And by the way, that's the biggest population you have in your school district. And so as we continue to move forward, as long as we honor, if you will, the wishes of the community through the survey, we stand a better chance of success. And Rob, if I've said anything out of turn, please correct me.
No, I think the only addendum I would say to what Rob said is, 35 to 54 parent, a lot of staff too as well. So it's not uncommon to see those bars be a little bit longer, and it's certainly not a bad thing, because I always tell folks, staff and parents aren't taking a school survey. I don't know who would, but that's not you here. Clearly, you're getting a lot of those age group representations on this slide. Then we asked, where do you live? About a third of folks, the most, were in the village of Spring Valley, followed by the town of Gilman. But you had representation from all the municipalities that in some way, shape, or form feed into your district, including the town of Rock Elm down at the bottom. But the other reason I'm encouraged by this is it seems your mailing list was also pretty accurate. I get concerned if 1, 2, 3 districts have 0 respondents. Is it, then I ask myself, did they not take the survey, or did they not get the survey? So the fact that you have representation even from the smaller slivers of different municipalities that feed into you also gives me the confidence in the mailing list that you purchased as well. Second to last demographic question. These are 2 questions that will get us to 3 key subgroups. We'll want to know in isolation how staff are feeling. We'll want to know in isolation how parents are feeling. But then, really importantly, because they're the biggest, the no, the non-parents, non-staff. And these are the questions that get us to those 3 groups, including 2 of them that you'll see here. This is a general communication question, but it's worded quite carefully. What it does not say is, how do you receive information from us? Because you may be communicating with me in a way that I don't really want you to communicate with me. Yes, I'm reading about you here, but I really want you to do X instead of Y. This is the preference question. How do you want to hear from us when we have something important to tell you? Overwhelmingly, your non-parents, non-staff want to learn about what's going on at school through the newsletters. I would say not insignificant, but certainly a big step down is your website, followed by the Sun Argus, Facebook, and the Pierce County Journal. Parents are a bit more balanced, but you can still see that newsletters are very valuable to your parents, as are emails, the website, Facebook, and then down towards the bottom, you can see that they also value those phone notifications. The other way I like to use this data is by making sure that you don't waste resources. It seems like a few years ago, districts were a lot more active on Twitter, and now very few people want to learn about you on there. I don't know if fewer people are just using Twitter or just aren't as active on it anymore. So if you have a really, active Twitter presence, you may want to rethink that. It's just not getting a lot of eyeballs. It's not a lot of bang for your buck. But this also allows you to target different messages to different groups depending on who you need to know what you're about to tell them. Then the meat of the survey. So recall that in your survey, there was a series of projects that John and Rob helped you put together. We often call them buckets in our world. And then as a survey taker, if you recall, I got to go through and I basically had my menu of choices. And I got to tell you as a survey respondent, what is high priority, what needs to be done right now, all the way down to low priority. I'm not really enthusiastic about it. I don't want you to do it right now. But those are your guardrails. If something's very unimportant, it's a 1. If something's very important, the do right now thing, that's a 3. But you got to be within that range somewhere. So the higher the score, the more important it is to do soon. The color codes here are the proportion of folks that said high, medium, or low, and then that corresponding score. So the number one item from your community that they want you to tackle first at a priority score of 2.28 isn't one that's necessarily all that surprising. It's the mechanical and electrical systems. People get it. People get that the guts of the building are what keeps the lights on, the water running, the kids safe and warm and dry. So that's pretty common to see that quite high. And people get, if it's something they got to do to their own home, they get that it needs to be done to the school as well. Second place, not too far behind, only 0.06 of a point behind was your transportation building. Third place was the pool. In fourth, the CTE, Ag, Family and Consumer Science area. Right smack dab in the middle, between low and high, right at a medium priority, is your building exterior at $450K. And then more towards what's the bottom of the list. Outdoor athletics fell below the median of the scale, 1.93. And then you take a step down, leaning a little more towards 1 here than you are 3, the financial literacy, music, and health project. Tied at 1.73 is the building interior. And by the way, as I go down here, you can obviously see you take a big step down just in your greens from what people deem to be a high priority for outdoor athletics to the proportion of people that believe the financial literacy, building interior, and classroom and support spaces are high priority. So even visually, you can kind of get a grasp of where are people particularly enthusiastic and where are they not. The shorter the green bar, the longer the yellow bar, the more they're telling you that, yeah, maybe I get it, but I'm not in favor of you doing it right now. So while that's the order, I think that's really valuable, but then I always step back and think about my own house. You know, at some point here in the next couple of years, I'm going to have to redo the roof. We're thinking about redoing the floors. There's all kinds of things that I want to do around my house, but I know that I can't do all of them at one time. So much like your survey respondents, I have an order. I have a priority in which I want to do them, but it comes down to the money. It always does. So you have your order of preference. Here's how much money your community is telling you that they're willing to support so that you know you can back into a project that is going to be within the tax threshold that your community will support. So starting in the upper left, non-parents, non-staff, we begin with them because they're the largest group. I'll have more to say about them in just a moment, but they're the largest. One level down. So this dark green right here corresponds to the $20 million that you could put on a referendum. But if the Spring Valley Board of Ed decided to do so, fewer than 1 in 10 of the largest chunk of your community would support it. So we know we have to cross $20 million off the list. That's not going to fly. So then the game is, well, how low do we need to go until we cross the 50% threshold? For your non-parents, non-staff, they're just below level 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 levels down, 1, 2, 3, 4 levels down. They're just below 5 million or so. Parents, though, like you heard Rob say, they're also a significant voting bloc. They're supportive, right around 15 million. Staff are very, very influential, but there's really not that many of them. They're supportive at 3 levels down. They come in around 10 million. So you're probably wondering then, well, that's all fine and good, but what's the number then, Rob? Get to the point. What number, if we're going to put something potentially on a ballot, what should that be? This next slide answers that for you. So it's the same data, it's the same support, but now what we've done is we've weighted each group depending on how big they are. So what this is saying is, if you as the Board of Ed decided to put a $15 million referendum on the ballot, your parents came in at 42% support, they're about 30% of the Spring Valley School District. So you have to weight that support. Non-parents, non-staff are about 70% of your community. Less than a quarter of that group would support a $15 million referendum. So when you would carry this equation out, what this is saying is if you as the Board of Ed decided to put $15 million in the ballot, just over 1/4 of the community would support it, well below 50% plus one that would be needed for approval. When you go one level down, 10 million, it is very, very close. If you decided to put that on the ballot today, just a hair under 50% would support it at 49.9%. And on our stoplight system, we kind of put that in the yellow. That would be firmly in the too close to call. Yes, there's a margin of error, but as it stands right now, that would be below 50%. When you get to 5 million, you clear the hurdle. You're looking at just under 58% support for a $5 million referendum. So what I take away from this here is 5 million, you could go above that. It seems like that double digit is a bit of a threshold in people's minds in terms of what I want to read on a ballot. So you're looking at probably something closer to 10 million than 5 million, but something certainly in the single digits. And I know this is where Rob will step in and he'll work with you to say, okay, this is the number that we know we need to shoot for. Here is the order of the projects given by our community. So his next step will then be to work with John, work with you as a board to help back into a plan and saying, okay, we know this is a number we need to do. Now, what projects can we check off the list in what order to make sure we follow the directions from the community? There's a couple of slides that I want to go through, but before I do so, any questions about the method to the madness here?
Yeah, Rob, this is John. What accuracy history do you have at school perceptions over time?
Yeah, we hover about 92, 93%. In spring, we were 20 of 23, and well, 2 weeks ago, we were 39 of 45.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I do always, now that I'm thinking about it, I do always make that addendum though, is what we define to be success may be different than what other people define to be success. We define success as accuracy. So if we think a referendum is going to pass based on what the data is telling us, we'll tell you. And if it passes, we were right. If the data says it's going to fail and a board takes that plan to ballot anyhow and it fails, that's a success. That's a win in our world, because that is an accurate prediction based on what the data is telling us. So we're not in the business of seeing a referendum pass. We're not in the business of seeing a referendum fail. We're in the business of making sure that you're hearing what your taxpayers are saying so that you know what they believe their threshold to be and in what projects. So again, success isn't a passage in our world. Success is just telling you what we think is going to happen and will that ultimately play out on election day.
Thanks, Rob.
Mm-hmm. Anything else here before I wrap up your final slides? Okay. Keep noodling. I'll pause once more at the end, but I want to round out a little bit of different data. This is the overall satisfaction section of your survey. The question read, how is the district doing in each of the following areas? The higher, the better. Can't get lower than a 1, can't get higher than a 4, but you want to, in a perfect world, be at 4.00 across the board. A couple of observations from this slide. So the 4 areas that we asked your survey takers to rate you on were delivering a high quality education, keeping the public informed, managing funds appropriately, and building pride in the community. The percent there, that's the percentage of your respondents who told you you're doing a great or a good job, and then the corresponding 1 to 4 scale. So what I see here is they're particularly satisfied with the extent to which you're delivering kiddos a high quality education, and you are a source of pride in the community. You know, around 3/4, if not above, of your respondents are telling you you're doing a great or good job on those 2 metrics. I've never met a district who doesn't have work to do in terms of keeping the public informed. There's never, I don't know if there is something as over communication, especially when you're talking about a potential referendum. But the good news here now is you do have that communication question preference at the beginning. So now you know exactly how you can communicate with folks and different folks to make sure that you're getting the data into their hands in the right way, or your plans in their hands in the right way. The other nice thing that John has access to is he can disaggregate pretty far, but with some guardrails. So actually myself included, I don't have any special privileges as a school perceptions employee. But whether it's me or John, if I disaggregate too far, our system will put up roadblocks and say, that's not enough people. You might find out who they are. So we're not even going to show you that data. But if John wanted to back up and say, show me how 65 plus folks feel in El Paso and how they want to be communicated with, as long as there's 5 or more people that are checking that they are part of that group, he can go in and say, well, do different communities want to be communicated with in a different way? Do different communities have a preference for social media? There's lots of different ways you can dig into that data. But that is a way to improve the metric of keeping the public informed. The third one is fairly unsurprising. That is always the lowest when you're talking about money. So we do 2 different kinds of community surveys. Well, we do a lot of them, but one type of community surveys is more the general planning. How are we doing? Where should we put our resources? When those types of surveys go out and you're not talking about potential tax impacts, that metric is always higher. Whenever there is a survey that talks about a referendum, people think, well, if you're asking for a referendum, then you must not be managing your funds appropriately, or you wouldn't be asking me for a referendum. That always happens. Folks just maybe not know how common referendums are. I think there's 5 districts in the state that have never experienced a referendum passage. So this is something that everybody does, but folks don't always know that. So I would say you're in large company there, knowing that that's the lowest whenever there's a referendum that is being tested. Finally, then, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend or family member? There are 3 primary, well, maybe 4 primary ways I look at this. First one, your score. Higher the better. Higher the score from 0 to 10, the more likely somebody is to recommend you. You're well north of 5, which is the neutral point. You're at a score of 6.95. Another way to look at this is just by eyeballing it. You got more greens than you do reds. That's a good place to be. But a third way to look at this is by doing some quick math here and totaling up your 9s or 10s and your 8s. So 20 and 12 is 32, plus another 18 is 50%. That's the little blue line note here. So you have 50% that give themselves an 8, a 9, or a 10. The reason that's important is the research behind this question suggests that those folks that give themselves an 8, a 9, or a 10 will act as ambassadors on your behalf. They are the ones that are going to go talk well about what the school district of Spring Valley is doing, and you don't have to motivate them to do so. They're already there. They're excited. They are the ones that are going to strike up a conversation next week at Thanksgiving about the cool things that the district is doing. The fact that you got 50% there is really quite remarkable. That's not really all that common. So that's a great place to be, including the 1 and 5 that are giving you a perfect score. The 6 and 7 folks, they have a positive association with you. They're just not quite there to strike up a conversation. But when you add those folks in, they're at exactly 2/3. 67% are leaning towards giving you the recommendation to a friend or family member. You do have some neutrals, but that's pretty common to have that long because we don't offer a cop-out here. We force people into making a decision. We don't offer it, I don't know. But for the folks that truly don't want to have an opinion, they don't want to give you a 10, they don't want to give you a 0, so they choose a 5. Just to stay safe. So it's not uncommon to have that be a little longer. But takeaway here is you're in good shape by having 50% of your folks be ambassadors on your behalf. Those are all the smart things I have to say, but I'm more than happy to take some questions from you.
Questions here. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Well,
if anything comes up after, by all means, let me know.
Rob, just a quick question that I hear in a number of districts where I work. Getting back to the statistical relevance, we had 20% turnout. A lot of folks that aren't familiar with surveys, they see the results, even though it was fantastic participation. For many people, it doesn't seem like fantastic participation. Can you talk to why statistically the numbers that we have here are relevant?
Yeah, so, you don't need everybody to be able to extrapolate to the entire community. And I know John mentioned our accuracy rate. We are proud of that. It's not easy to do 6 to 8 months. I mean, 2 weeks ago was a testament to that. But we are proud of that accuracy rate that we have, especially over the course of this year. The other thing that we've done and seen districts do in the past, which by the way, I'm happy you didn't do, but there are some districts that will do not anonymous surveys. If you want to take the survey, you have to attach your name to it. I don't know that that's a good idea, but we've seen it done. And since other districts want to do that, we've used that as a natural experiment. And then we've cross-referenced who takes our surveys with voter roll information, because you can see who votes in one election. Obviously, you can't tell how people vote, but you can see who votes in what election. And there's a large overlap between folks that take our survey and the names and addresses of folks that do vote. That middle of that Venn diagram is pretty wide. So in combination of a lot of influential folks in the community will take your survey, including those parents and staff and grandma and grandpa, that accuracy rate being quite high, and seeing an overlap between who votes and who takes the survey, that helps. And recall that one of our methods here is to send a survey to every household, so that nobody can show up and say, well, gee, I didn't know you were doing this, or nobody told me. Well, every household, to the best we can when partnership with a printer, is get one of these to every household. That's why we don't do a random survey. We see one of our big values is being able to educate the community on what it is you're doing, what's wrong, how much is this going to cost me, and it sits there on the counter. When you do a random sample, by definition, not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to be educated on what it is you're looking to do, and that can make people mad, especially in a small community. You'll get folks saying, "Well, I pay taxes here. Why didn't you ask me?" So I guess that fourth factor of also sharing it with everybody in the community also gives you some stability as you look towards election day.
Any other questions?
No.
I'm good. All right. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, Rob, thanks so much for your time and your team's time in putting this together. This was I think we started talking in end of July or early August.
Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Yep, that's right. It sure does. Have a
All right,
good
John,
night.
let me know if anything comes up. I'm at my desk all the time. So if anything comes up tomorrow, just shoot me an email.
Thanks, Rob.
All right,
Thanks,
see you
Rob.
guys. Yep, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Stop recording. Let's do it. It's called.